All right, Nels. So today I would like to enable the project export Sidekiq Queue running into Kubernetes. Um, change request 1837 contains this information. This is no different than our experiment that we performed a few weekends ago. The difference being that we will operate using the full capacity of 16 pods. We're not limiting it to 4 pods like we did a few weekends ago. And the second item to note is that we don't plan on rolling this back. So this is a permanent thing that's going into production. We will not be making any changes to the existing virtual machines. So the virtual machines that currently run Project Export, they're not being turned off or shut down or removed or anything. They will continue chugging through Project Exports as needed. So by the time this becomes enabled, we will technically have 32 total running project export queues inside of Sidekiq, 16 as VMs and 16 as pods in production. The other important bit to this is this very important line that deployments in Kubernetes are currently going to be handled in a manual fashion. This work will be shared between Jarve and I, and we'll simply roll out a new change to Kubernetes after a deployment in production has been completed successfully. Him and I will coordinate during our day throughout the week. We hope to complete the necessary work to finish auto deploy this week, so this should not be a lengthy thing to worry about. So for this particular change, all we're going to do is merge a merge request. Once that's merged, we go find the pipeline and manually hit the play button to push it into production. And I've got links to logs and metrics that we watching throughout this process. So I'll go ahead and open up this. This MR is very straightforward. So we're just changing the queue from null to project export. And we're changing the replicas. Currently it's set to 1, min and max. We're going to set a minimum of 4 because the pods do take a while to start up, and we'll set a maximum of 16. That is what we plan to run in production in the deep dark future. So I will proceed to hit the, I guess I gotta get rid of the whip. So I will now hit the merge button. And while that merges, we'll watch the pipeline. I'll have to bump up this font size too.
This one, filter Kubernetes.pod _ name exists. Is that in the JSON? So would I do JSON.Kubernetes, or is it just Kubernetes dot?
Can you repeat the question, please?
I'm looking at the ways to monitor this under logs, and it says to filter on JSON.class project export worker, and Kubernetes.pod name exists. Kubernetes.pod name, is that its own sort of top level
yes,
selector?
it should be. Yeah. If Kibana ever loads, I'll see if I can't pull it up.
I'm pulling it up just to watch it.
So this particular pipeline, we gate the production deploy manually. So all the other environments except for production will deploy manually. So I'll just let that run for a second. Apparently Zoom is not happy with my computer right now. So pod name exists. So we really should not see any logs at this moment in time because the pod that's currently running in production isn't doing any work at all. So seeing that we don't have any search results right now is to be expected. I'll check these dry runs just to make sure that we don't have anything accidental going into place. It should not happen because we are caught up with everything.
So I noticed there's, like you said, there's no rollback plan for this. If there's some kind of like problem with these particular Sidekiq Queue workers, uh, what's the what is the mitigation response for that?
So to be clear, we do have a rollback plan. It's
Sure.
just that's in case of emergency. Um, Let me go through that right now before I deploy to production. So the rollback steps are relatively straightforward. There's two ways we could go about doing this. If there's a situation where we discovered an issue, but we could take our time to perform the rollback procedure of this, the merge request that I'm merging in now, we could simply revert. That'll be the easiest and quick,
Okay.
not the quickest, but that will be the easiest way to get through this. The only thing that you need to be aware of is that if you do perform a revert, you need to make sure that you go back in and manually apply it to the production environment because that's still a manual action at this moment in time. If for whatever reason the process of creating the revert merge request and getting it reverted is too lengthy and we need to stop immediately, you can log into our console server and you can just scale it down to 0 pods. So there are two commands you can copy and paste, and they'll perform the precise actions you need to occur, and that'll happen pretty much immediately. It takes roughly between 30 and 60 seconds for the pods to shut down, but that'll force them to delete themselves. Um, so that's our break glass scenario. Reverting the merge request is obviously the desired. I've got that as the first step here, but I even have a comment saying, that takes roughly 10 minutes to go from all the way through the pipeline. But if that's not quick enough, break glass by logging to the console server and just manually scaling that HPA down to 0.
Perfect.
Conveniently, that also locks the HPA, the horizontal pod autoscaler. So if you set it to 0, there's no way for it to scale up. The one thing that we want to make sure is that if we aren't notified, like if Jarv and I are not notified, just make sure if we decide to do the break glass scenario, let's make sure we revert the merge request anyways, that we don't have an inconsistency between what's in production and what our repo is expecting out of production.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've deployed to all of our environments. So I'm going to hit the play button on production. And we'll watch that here. And I guess if I wanted to, let me roll that into here somewhere. I'm monitoring how well things are going in my state. Wrong tab, this tab. Let me stop the share real quick. I'm going to try to share my entire desktop. I feel like it might be,
Sure.
the font size will be a little goofy, but I'll try to reconcile. So just logging into the production server. So watch, cube, control, get pods in the GitLab namespace. We care specifically about Sidekiq. So we should see one pod. Perfect. So it's already started the deploy for the export. So we see the inits coming in for the rest of them. So we're switching the HPA from 1 to 4 pods, and we're also changing the queue from null to project export. So once these new pods come online, they're going to start processing work, which is pretty cool. For some reason, auto scrolling is not working inside of this CI screen. It's great. Do you have any questions while you watch the paint dry?
Do you expect that this will help to reduce some of the SLO alertings that we've been seeing lately for the project export queue?
No. Um, We're not changing the behavior for which Sidekiq export or the project export operates in any way, shape, or form. This is strictly a change to where project export is being picked up from. We have done a little bit of research and we have determined that project export runs ever so slightly faster inside of our Kubernetes infrastructure, this being the nature of the Kubernetes pods don't have NFS mounts, and because of that, all the data is stored locally on the nodes. So the process of getting and storing data in the process that Rails runs during the job um, just shaves a few milliseconds off each network call that needs to be made because we're not making network calls. Instead, they're just storage calls to the underlying VM instead of NFS to a different server to get data. Aside from that, I don't see any change in the nature of how Sidekiq export is going to operate unless there's a catastrophic problem, and then we would roll back.
Seeing the first few jobs come in.
So I guess once these last two pods transition from live to ready, this deployment job should be successful. And we should see that last remaining pod at the very top of my list get shut down.
Looks like the Kubernetes container image is getting pulled from dev.gitlab.org.
That's accurate.
Okay.
All images that we rely on for the GitLab product will be pulled from our dev instance. Okay, so we have succeeded in the deployment. So Helm is just doing its cleanup. This will turn, it's already gone. Okay, so I'll stop my sharing of my entire desktop and I'll share just my browser again. So over here in Kibana, we should start seeing data now that some work is being pulled from Kubernetes.
I still only see two.
Perfect. So we see a bunch of stuff in here.
That's interesting. That's a lot more than I'm seeing.
I've noticed that Kibana is a little awkward when it comes to stuff like this. I'm not really sure how to explain why you would see certain things and sometimes not. I've had to research, like search again multiple times sometimes. Where's the message here? So I'll just add this to a panel. I just want to look at the logs real quick. Okay, so this was probably the old pod shutting down, but we see project export coming online. I should have added the name of the pod to our panel. Kubernetes host. This one. And then reorder, review over. Okay, so yeah, that was our old pod that shut down. We have our new pods are watching project export, so they're definitely processing work. And I bet if we scroll down far enough, let me just hit refresh. We should be able to see that, hey, I'm pulling work or something. But I don't see that. Or if there's just simply not any work to be pulled right now. But there's other metrics we could look at. I'm not going to attempt to change my screen size for this one, but for data specific to Sidekiq in our pods, we have a pod info dashboard specific to Sidekiq.
Oh, nice.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we should see a count of 7 for the replica set. Come on. So production, we can see we went from our standard 1 pod and we scaled up to 7. So we got 7 pods running. They're relatively idle, so I bet you they're probably not pulling any work right now. There is another dashboard that I linked to, this one. Queue detail, project export, and queues per second. Yeah, there's just nothing in queued. Queue time per node. Yeah, there's nothing queued up right now, so the pods aren't going to be doing any work for the immediate moment. But that completes what I wanted to share with you. Do you have any questions regarding the rollback procedure?
No.
Okay. Do you have
Well,
any questions?
where do you? I'm sure it's noted on the issue. Where do you execute? Okay, never mind. It's noted. Got it.
Yeah. So reverting the MR happens on GitLab.com in the K8s workloads
Yep.
GitLab.com repo. If you need to, this is production, so if you need to do the break glass procedure, you would SSH into our console server where you have Kubernetes set up or kube control set up and just scale it down to 0. Cool.
Cool.
Any other questions, man?
You want to stop recording?
Sure.